The alien fleet floated above the blue planet, its ships stretching across the blackness like a steel storm waiting to fall. Commanders inside those ships studied Earth with cold eyes, expecting the same weakness they had seen in other young worlds. To them, humanity was small, divided, and unprepared for the weight of the galaxy. They whispered among themselves that this conquest would be easy, that Earth would kneel before the power of ancient empires, and that human resistance would be crushed in days. Yet deep beneath the southern ice, in a place the aliens could not imagine, the ground trembled as if it had been waiting for this moment. A signal, old and broken, was sent out across the void. It was not polished, not clean, but rusted and heavy with age, like the voice of something long asleep. The aliens froze when they caught it. The strange transmission carried a pattern they had never seen, and their records, stretching back thousands of years, held nothing like it. Their oldest historians listened in shock, recognizing faint traces that whispered of a time before their own civilizations. The static grew stronger, and then, between the cracking noise of the signal, came a whisper, deep and rough, as though spoken from stone itself. "The Guardians are not dead." Silence swept across the alien command deck. None of them understood. Guardians? Guardians of what? They searched their archives in panic, but every answer ended in missing files, destroyed histories, and forbidden stories. Meanwhile, on Earth, the snowfields of Antarctica broke open under sudden quakes. White glaciers split like glass under a hammer, roaring as giant slabs of ice collapsed into the sea. Scientists working in distant outposts looked out their windows and froze in terror as the horizon shook with force. It was not an earthquake, not a storm, it was something else, something alive. In the heart of the ice, a deep metallic groan spread like the cry of a beast long trapped. Strange sounds, too precise to be natural, echoed from the frozen abyss, like hammers striking iron. Satellite images showed cracks forming in circles, wide enough to cover whole mountains. The world watched as footage leaked online, blurry and filled with static, showing shadows moving beneath the ice. No human could explain it, but everyone felt the same chill. Something buried for thousands of years was waking up. The aliens, circling above, sent probes to study the disturbance, but their machines failed within minutes, falling silent as though swallowed by a greater power. Panic spread through their fleets, though they tried to hide it from one another. They had seen many planets fall, but never had they seen one reach into the deep past and call forth something older than stars. In Antarctica, the rumbling grew louder. Icebergs split, seas boiled around them, and the sky filled with clouds blacker than night. The metallic voice from below whispered again, not words this time but tones, like a melody, a code so old and powerful it shook both human and alien minds. Then came the great breaking. A roar, louder than thunder, split the continent as a mountain of ice collapsed into dust. From the heart of the glacier, a giant silhouette rose, slow and unstoppable. At first, no one could believe their eyes. It was not a rock, not a natural shape, but a structure of metal so ancient that it glowed with strange lights, flickering like dying stars. Towering higher than any building, it pushed through the ice as though it had been waiting for centuries to breathe again. Cameras captured the first clear image. A warship, scarred with cracks and strange markings, but alive. Its engines, silent for so long, pulsed with a dull red glow. Human scientists screamed into their radios, begging governments to explain, but governments had no answers. The aliens, however, knew enough to fear. Their records showed fragments of battles long forgotten, whispers of a fleet that vanished before empires were born. Now they realized what Earth had been hiding. Ships that belonged to no living race, vessels built by hands that had disappeared before history began. The warship shook itself free, breaking the last layers of ice that bound it. Its hull was massive, etched with symbols that seemed to shift as though alive. Light poured from its scars, blue and white, as if its heart still burned. Around the world, televisions and phones streamed the impossible sight. Some people fell to their knees, praying, while others cried in fear. What was this ship? Who built it? And why was it under human soil? The aliens demanded answers, sending messages to Earth's leaders, but humanity remained silent. The old signal still played in the void, repeating the same chilling line, "The Guardians are not dead." Above, the alien fleet trembled. They had come to conquer a weak planet, but instead they had awakened something that did not belong to the present age. Inside their command halls, some wanted to retreat, others wanted to strike quickly before more ships awoke, but none could agree. The silence from Earth was worse than any weapon, because it meant one thing: humans knew. They knew what was buried. They knew what waited. And they had chosen this exact moment to reveal it. The great warship finally lifted itself into the air, snow and shattered ice cascading off its frame like water. Its engines burned brighter, and the sound of its power rolled across the continent like endless thunder. To the watching world, it was both terrifying and beautiful, a god of steel rising from its frozen grave. Aliens stared in horror as their scanners confirmed the truth. This ship was older than their civilizations. It was older than their empires. It was older than their gods. Humanity stood quiet, but in that silence was strength, and the galaxy realized, too late, that Earth was not weak, not helpless, but the guardian of something no empire could ever control. The warship floated above Antarctica, ice dripping from its massive hull as if it had just broken free from a frozen tomb, and the world stared in silence, unsure whether to feel hope or fear. Around the globe, news stations replayed the same images again and again. The colossal vessel rising from the shattered glacier, its engines glowing faintly, its surface scarred with symbols no one could read. Some said it was a miracle, others called it a curse, but deep inside every heart was the same question: how could such a ship exist on Earth? Scientists rushed to the site, their helicopters battling against snowstorms and the constant thunder of shifting ice, and when they arrived they found themselves standing before something that defied reason. The ship was larger than any human city, and its metal, though rusted and cracked, still hummed with life, sending out vibrations that shook the ground beneath their feet. Instruments failed, compasses spun, and digital devices died as if the ship rejected modern technology. Yet the strangest thing was not its size or its power, but the fact that it seemed to be waiting. Its engines pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, and the scientists felt, without words, that the ship was aware of them. Far above, in the black void, the alien fleet circled nervously. Their commanders ordered scans and readings, but the results only brought more fear. The metal of the ship did not match any known element in galactic records. The energy signatures were older than their star charts, older even than their myths. To admit this was impossible, yet their own instruments betrayed them with the truth. This ship was not only ancient, it was beyond history itself. Whispers spread across alien crews, whispers of a time before empires, before order, when legends spoke of weapons too dangerous to survive. Now, watching this ship awaken, they wondered if those stories had never been myths at all. Meanwhile, Earth shook again. The frozen desert split with new cracks, and the sound of deep rumbling rose from beneath the ice fields. Helicopters swayed, scientists fell to their knees, and satellites captured the impossible sight: more shadows moving under the surface. Across the oceans and deserts, strange signals began to pulse, hidden places that had long been thought ordinary suddenly glowing with heat. In the Sahara, dunes exploded outward as a circle of fire burned beneath the sand. In the Pacific, the water churned as if something vast was rising from the seafloor. In the Himalayas, entire peaks trembled, avalanches falling as the mountains cracked open like shells. The world's governments tried to silence the truth, shutting down transmissions, censoring broadcasts, and denying everything, but it was already too late. Citizens with phones and cameras streamed the events live, their shaky footage spreading across the internet faster than it could be stopped. Billions of people watched in awe as the planet itself seemed to awaken. The aliens, watching from above, grew restless. One warship had been enough to shake their courage, but now more were stirring, and none of their records told them how many Earth was hiding. They demanded answers, sending sharp messages into Earth's networks, but humanity's leaders stayed quiet, their faces pale in hidden rooms as they realized the truth. These ships did not belong to them, not really. They had been buried long before their nations, their languages, their very history. They were relics of another age, guardians from a war no one remembered, placed in the care of Earth without the knowledge of its people. Now that guardianship had ended. As the ancient vessel stirred, the silence of governments was replaced by something heavier, a choice. Should they try to claim the ships as their own? Should they deny them and hope they slept again? Or should they accept that these were not weapons, but warnings? For the common people watching, none of that mattered. All they knew was that the Earth they thought they understood had just become a mystery. The aliens, however, understood too well. Panic spread through their ranks as their leaders recalled forbidden archives, fragments of data that hinted at a fleet of monsters created by a race so powerful it had vanished without trace. And now, humanity stood at the heart of that secret, the chosen guardians of weapons that predated every known civilization. As the day turned to night, and the northern skies lit with strange auroras caused by the awakening ships, the world's people whispered to one another in fear and hope. What was rising from beneath their planet? Would it defend them, or destroy them? In Antarctica, the first warship tilted slightly, as if adjusting itself, and a beam of light shot into the sky, straight into orbit, striking fear into the alien fleet. It was not an attack, but a signal, as though the ship was calling to others of its kind. And indeed, across deserts, mountains and oceans, more giants began to stir, their shapes rising through fire, water, and stone. The awakening had begun, and neither humans nor aliens could stop it. The galaxy, for the first time in ages, trembled, as Earth revealed itself not as a child among stars, but as the keeper of a secret far older than anyone dared imagine. The world shook under the weight of revelation as more ancient warships rose from their hidden graves, tearing through ice, stone, and sea as if the planet itself had been waiting to give them back to the sky, and yet in the halls of human power, leaders said nothing. Governments scrambled, desperate to hide their fear, issuing weak statements that denied what billions of eyes were already witnessing on their screens, but silence spoke louder than denial, and it was this silence that terrified both humans and aliens alike. In cities around the globe, protests erupted as people demanded answers, while others fell into prayer, convinced the end of days had come. Journalists, working in shadows to avoid government blocks, released images of the colossal vessels floating above deserts and oceans, their glowing engines humming with unnatural light, their symbols shifting across their hulls like living scars. The world could not explain what it was seeing, but everyone felt it. The ships were not just machines, they were waiting for something, as if they were not dead relics but guardians standing by for a command. Above, the alien fleets spiraled in panic, their leaders arguing across encrypted channels. To retreat now would mean admitting fear, but to attack might awaken even greater horrors. Their sensors, running desperate scans, confirmed that the ships carried power far beyond anything modern empires could create, weapons that bent not just energy but reality itself. Still, the fleets hesitated, because what they feared most was not the ships, but humanity's silence. Why had Earth not spoken? Why had its leaders not screamed in confusion like prey, not begged for mercy, not claimed ignorance? The lack of reaction was a message in itself, and the message was terrifying. Humanity knew. Somewhere, hidden from cameras and satellites, a council gathered in a dark underground chamber, men and women who were not surprised by the awakening, who had waited their entire lives for this moment. They carried the burden of knowledge passed in whispers across generations, and though their faces were old and tired, their voices were steady as they spoke the words sworn never to be said until the time arrived. "It is time," one of them whispered, and the others nodded in grim agreement. Outside, the ships responded, their engines pulsing faster as though the words had reached them. Scientists across the world noticed the strange synchronization, the way the vessels moved not randomly but in careful patterns above Earth's surface. In the deserts, 3 warships aligned into a triangle that stretched wider than countries. In the oceans, 2 ships formed a line that pointed toward the stars. In Antarctica, the first awakened ship tilted upward, projecting a map into the heavens, its glowing image seen not just by satellites but with the naked eye, as if it was written directly onto the sky itself. The map was ancient, showing constellations not as they appeared now, but as they had looked thousands of years ago. It showed battles across the galaxy, star systems burning, fleets falling, and at the heart of it all, the same warships now floating above Earth. The aliens watching from orbit froze in terror, for in those glowing records they recognized their own ancestors, crushed and destroyed by these same vessels. History, it seemed, had lied to them. They had been told that their empires rose from strength, that their ancestors had built glory from nothing, But now the truth stared them in the face. Their empires had been born from survival, their ancestors allowed to live only because the guardians had disappeared. A murmur spread through alien crews, some speaking of retreat, others of surrender, but commanders silenced them with threats. Even so, no commander could deny the truth. Their fleets were shaking, their courage collapsing. On Earth, ordinary people watched the map in awe, not fully understanding but sensing that the galaxy was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Priests, scholars, and soldiers alike spoke of destiny, of humanity's role no longer being small, but central. The council underground remained silent, speaking only in nods, their eyes locked on screens that showed the ships moving as if guided by unseen hands. One of them whispered a chilling thought. Perhaps humanity was not controlling the ships at all, but simply standing witness to the guardians fulfilling their own purpose. Above, the map shifted, showing not just past battles but a shadow on the edge of the galaxy, a dark shape that seemed to stretch across stars. The aliens gasped, recognizing fragments of a legend long buried, the name of an enemy too terrible to speak aloud. The humans in the council stared, realizing with cold dread that the ships had not awakened for defense against the alien fleets above, but for something else, something far worse, something coming. Across the planet, fear mixed with awe, and yet no government dared speak. The silence stretched like a storm cloud, pressing on everyone's hearts. Humanity, it seemed, had finally been forced to remember its forgotten role. They were not the first, and they were not alone, but they were the chosen keepers of something the galaxy had hoped would remain buried forever. The ships above Earth floated patiently, their engines glowing brighter, their formation precise, their silence heavy. They did not fire, did not attack, did not move toward the alien fleets. Instead, they waited, as though listening for a command older than history, a silent order written into their very being. The world held its breath, knowing that whatever came next would decide not only the fate of Earth, but the future of the galaxy itself. The sky above Earth burned with light as the ancient warships began to move, their colossal forms shifting with slow grace, as if the very stars obeyed their will, and across the world billions of eyes watched in silent terror, too afraid to blink. The vessels, older than memory, aligned in strange and deliberate patterns, hovering above deserts, mountains, and oceans, their glowing engines humming like the beating of some eternal heart. From Antarctica, the first awakened ship tilted upward, its scarred hull splitting open to reveal hidden panels that pulsed with blue fire, and then, with a sound deeper than thunder, it released a beam of light into the heavens. But this was not an attack. The beam stretched outward, cutting across the void, painting shapes in the night sky that no human had ever seen. The other warships responded, each one sending its own beam, and together they formed a vast pattern in space, a glowing lattice of stars and lines, like a map carved across the firmament. Scientists on Earth screamed into radios, trying to record it, trying to explain it, but their words were drowned by awe. The map showed constellations not as they were today, but as they had been long ago, thousands, maybe millions of years before, and in its shifting images battles unfolded, great fleets clashing, planets burning, entire systems erased in silence. The alien commanders orbiting Earth froze as their ship's scanners confirmed what their terrified eyes already knew. The battles shown were real, recorded in ancient starlight, and the losing fleets were their ancestors, crushed by the very warships now awakening on Earth. Their empires had risen not in glory but in survival, their people spared only because the guardians had disappeared, and now the guardians had returned. Across the galaxy, whispers spread like fire as signals carried the images to far worlds. On barren colonies and shining capitals alike, races stared at the truth, their histories shattered, their pride broken. Humanity, a race thought small and weak, had been chosen as the keepers of weapons older than any empire, and that meant the galaxy had been living under a lie for all its ages. On Earth, the people trembled with equal awe and dread. In villages and cities, prayers rose to the sky, children cried, soldiers gripped their weapons though they knew they were useless, and leaders hid in bunkers, unable to decide whether this was the greatest gift or the final curse. In the oceans, a ship rose from the deep, vast enough to part the waters like a new continent, its hull dripping with glowing blue as it joined the formation. In the Sahara, another vessel cracked open dunes the size of mountains as it lifted into the air, sand falling from its sides like rain. In the Himalayas, Snow and stone cascaded from peaks as yet another warship emerged from its prison of rock. Slowly, they rose higher and higher still, until together they encircled the planet, a crown of titans older than any story. The alien fleet pulled back, their courage breaking, but still they did not fire. Their commanders argued bitterly, some demanding retreat, others insisting on striking before the ships fully awakened, but none dared move without order, for they feared what even one strike might awaken. Then, without warning, one of the Earth warships shifted, turning its massive frame toward the alien fleet. Its hull cracked open, revealing a weapon so vast and strange that even the scanners could not define it. The aliens braced for annihilation, but the weapon did not fire. Instead, it released a wave of sound, low and deep, like the tolling of a bell across space. The sound passed through human hearts, through alien bones, through machines and stone and sea alike. It was not an attack, but a warning, and in its vibration was a meaning that needed no translation. Do not approach. On Earth, scientists fainted at their instruments, overwhelmed by the data. Governments tried to calm their people, but no words could hide the truth. The ships were not defending Earth from aliens. They were preparing for something greater. The map shifted again, the lattice of stars showing not just past battles but a shadow far away, a vast dark shape moving slowly across the galaxy. The aliens gasped as they recognized fragments of their oldest nightmares, an enemy erased from records, a force their ancestors had once faced but had never defeated, a darkness that only the Guardians had held back. And now the Guardians were awake again, not for conquest, not for pride, but for war. Humanity, standing beneath this silent crown of titans, realized the truth at last. They had not been chosen to command, nor to rule, but to keep safe the last fleet of a forgotten age, to hold it hidden until the time came when the galaxy would need them again. That time had arrived. As the warships moved in their silent dance above Earth, their beams painting the sky with history and warning alike, the world felt both terror and pride, for the Guardians were not dead, and with their awakening, the galaxy itself had changed forever. The world trembled with questions as the warships hovered in their silent formation, their glowing beams fading but leaving a weight in the air that pressed on every heart, and finally, the silence broke not from governments, not from generals, but from an old man with tired eyes who stepped forward on a broadcast that spread across every channel, his voice shaking yet steady as he revealed the truth humanity had buried even from itself. He was not a politician, not a soldier, but a historian, long forgotten by most, and yet the words he spoke carried more power than armies. He told the people that long before their empires, long before their nations or even their languages, humanity had been chosen for something greater. He spoke of a war so ancient that even the stars had shifted since its end, a war fought not between young civilizations but between forces so vast they made modern fleets look like sparks against a storm. In that war, a race beyond comprehension had built the Guardians, warships unlike anything seen before or since, and when that race fell, they entrusted the last of their fleet to a world still primitive, still fragile, still unnoticed by others. That world was Earth. Humanity had been given guardianship, not power, tasked with protecting the fleet and forgetting its existence until the time came when it would be needed again. To make this possible, the historian revealed, entire generations of humans had been forced to forget, their memories broken, their records erased, their history rewritten. The ships had slept under ice, stone, and sea while humanity grew, blind to the truth of what it carried. But some fragments of memory had survived, buried in myths and legends, the great floods, the fires from the sky, the gods who descended in ships of light. What humanity had called stories were pieces of the truth, half-remembered glimpses of the Guardians that had once defended the galaxy. The historian's words spread like wildfire, shocking a world that struggled to accept them, yet as people looked up at the colossal ships hanging above their skies, none could deny the evidence. The Guardians were real, and humanity's forgotten role was real too. Above, the alien fleet listened in silence, their commanders horrified as the pieces fell into place. The old man's words confirmed what their archives had hinted at but never dared state. Humanity was not weak, humanity was not late to the galaxy, humanity was the keeper of its deadliest secret. That meant Earth had been protected for a reason, shielded from early destruction, because the Guardians had chosen it. Alien crews muttered in fear, some openly asking their leaders if they should bow to Earth, if they should flee before the Guardians judged them as enemies. But the historian was not finished. His voice lowered as he revealed the most terrifying truth of all. The Guardians had not awakened because of alien fleets. They had awakened because the old enemy, the shadow seen on the star map, was stirring again. It was not a myth, not a legend, but a reality waiting at the edge of the galaxy, a force so dark that even empires refused to speak its name. Humanity, the historian said, had not been chosen to conquer, nor to rule, but to stand as the last defense when that enemy returned. And now, as the warships moved across the skies, the time had come. On Earth, fear mixed with a strange pride. For the first time in history, nations looked at one another not as rivals but as kin, realizing that their survival was tied not to wealth or power but to their role as guardians. Some wept at the burden. Others cheered at the destiny. Children pointed at the glowing ships and shouted that their world was not small after all. In orbit, alien leaders argued bitterly, for they saw no victory in what was coming. If humanity was the keeper of these warships, then the galaxy itself had no choice but to rely on them, even if they feared them. Pride was shattered, arrogance burned away, and what replaced it was something colder: dependence. The historian's final words echoed across every screen, simple yet powerful: we were not the first. But we may be the last. When his image faded, the world was silent, not from ignorance but from understanding. Humanity's forgotten role was no longer hidden. They were the guardians of weapons older than empires, chosen not by chance but by fate, and with the shadow of the ancient enemy moving closer with every heartbeat, they knew that destiny would soon demand a price. Above the planet, the warships pulsed with light, their engines like stars reborn, their silence a vow that when the time came, they would answer. The alien fleet scattered across orbit like a ring of knives, and Earth stood in the center, bleeding but unbroken, while the warships from under the ice roared into battle, their cannons spitting fire older than history, their shields burning with light no alien mind could fully understand. But as the battle raged, something strange began to unfold, because while the Guardians fought like gods reborn, some of the ships suddenly hesitated, their cannons slowing, their signals shifting, and deep. In mission control, human commanders felt their stomachs drop when they saw encrypted messages bouncing not between alien vessels but between the Guardians themselves, old codes no one on Earth could read, voices from the past whispering across frequencies, one repeating phrase pulsing like a heartbeat: not yet, and suddenly one Guardian ship peeled away, turning its weapons not toward the aliens but toward the other Guardians, striking with a blast so powerful the night sky lit like a second sun, shocking both sides into silence, the betrayal impossible to understand, humans screaming across the radio demanding answers, but the Guardians gave none, only the cold rhythm of war. And now the aliens, sensing a crack in this strange alliance, pressed harder, their flagship moving closer, its admiral laughing in triumph, convinced that even humanity's gods could not stay united, and on Earth, fear returned. People watching in horror as two Guardians clashed in orbit, their strikes shaking mountains, their power tearing the edge of the atmosphere, humanity caught between enemies and uncertain allies, and yet, inside the chaos, a young officer in the Antarctic command bunker stared at the old console that had sent the awakening signal, his hands trembling but his mind refusing to break, because he noticed something. The betraying Guardian wasn't acting free, its signals carried an echo, a distortion, like something was controlling it, something older than even the Guardians themselves, and suddenly the officer shouted for the generals to listen, pointing at the data, explaining that the real enemy was not only the alien fleet but something buried even deeper in time. A force that had slept inside the Guardians and now wanted to wake fully, using betrayal to split them apart, his words shaking the room, some refusing to believe, others demanding proof. But then another Guardian's lights flickered strangely, almost as if it too would turn against its own. The possibility freezing every heart on Earth, and the aliens saw this weakness, charging forward, eager to strike while humanity's secret protectors tore themselves apart. But even then, the officer whispered the words no one wanted to hear. The Guardians are not fighting just the aliens, they are fighting themselves.